Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce to you someone very special to me and to the Imagination podcast community. Wife, homeschooling, stay-at-home mom, whistleblower, former gate kid, family court reform, CPS, and anti-child abuse advocate, former dental assistant, chronic illness, and tornado survivor, and one of my incredible mods you will see just about every single week in every single live premiere chat, Sharah Yahsharal. I originally met Sharah through the Imagination podcast when she started showing up day after day, week after week, and month after month in the chat every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday during our live premieres. Her protective, unconditionally loving, and uplifting energy became so infectious and influential that it wasn't long before I witnessed her leadership influence and made her a mod. You can find Sharah in the live chat on most episodes, casting out bullies, encouraging listeners, and supporting the guests in the biggest ways. She is an absolute breath of fresh air and an incredible ally to survivors, whistleblowers, and to the people who are helping them. What I didn't know about Sharah is that she too had a story. Sharah has heard and supported countless testimonies on the Imagination. And now today, Sharah is here to finally share her testimony, which involves horrors beyond comprehension, involving the legal kidnapping of her own child through corrupt family court and CPS. Her story begins with what she calls that night. The night she was taken to the emergency room after a health scare involving chronic illness symptoms she had been battling. As a mother and woman who was and is devoted to using homeopathic and holistic treatment for her and her family's health, Sharah relied on natural medicines such as cannabis to help alleviate her own severe symptoms and pain for her ongoing health issues. Little did she know that when she went home after her big health scare that landed her in the hospital for 3 days, that she would be met by police who would confiscate her cannabis and open up a CPS case that would result in a mother's worst nightmare, losing custody of her first daughter. But the targeting didn't stop there. After her second daughter was born, naturally and out of hospital care, Sharah ended up again being the subject of much controversy after doing a home birth and refusing to medicate her daughter post-birth, and was reported to CPS again. It's been 7 years since Sharah has spoken to her firstborn daughter, and it's time now that we give her the same support, unconditional love, and encouragement that she has selflessly been giving all of us as we listen to her now share her story. Sharah is now adding her piece of the puzzle that will validate so many other parents and children who have been separated by these corrupt systems profiting off of our children. Sharah joins the ranks of whistleblower parents such as Jack Pendergrass and Megan Walsh to help expose the biggest child trafficking racket in the world that operates under the cover and guise of CPS. And as someone who works in the cannabis industry full-time, I'm personally disgusted and appalled that plant medicine is being used against loving parents who are choosing to alienate prescription medication when and wherever possible to be and feel like the best versions of who they are. I'm honored to have Sharah on and ask that you please put everything you're doing away and give this incredible warrior whistleblowing woman your full attention the same way she would do and does for all of you and us. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest or share any information privately with me, please email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of my new book series featuring written survivor testimonies. And you can find the video with all the details on how to submit your testimony on any of my podcast channels. And lastly, I'd love your support on my Substack, where I've taken up investigative journalism as an outlet for me to share about my podcast, guests, and advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All my links are in the show notes, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for caring so deeply about survivors and whistleblowers, and for helping to make the Imagination podcast the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, woman of God, fierce and loving mama bear, spiritual warrior, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, tornado slayer, holistic healer, and someone I'm deeply honored to call my friend, Sharah Yahsharal. Sharah, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you, Emma. I'm so happy to be here.
It is awesome to have you here. And for people listening, I'm not joking when I say that literally 3 nights a week, almost every single week. If you guys go on the live premieres on YouTube, Sharah is always there, always. And there's only sometimes she's not. And I was telling her it's not an obligation, but we're so lucky to have her because she brings such a beautiful peace, love, and an empathetic aspect to what we do, which is give survivors a safe space to share their testimony. So I'm so happy to have you here, not just to share your story, but because you're just such a beautiful person. And I know people listening know who you are because you've been such an active part of this community. And I'm really excited that they get to now meet you just the same way that I get to today, and to learn more about this amazing woman who sort of popped out of nowhere and became a force to be reckoned with for advocating for survivors. So I'm really honored to have you here, Sharah. And I wanted to just start off. I know that we call you Sharah because we see that name in the chat. That's your YouTube handle. But I wanted to give you a chance just to introduce who you are, as far as your name, so people understand, just in case we refer to you as a different name at any point. We actually have a matching name, which is kind of fun. And then we'll go back and start your story from childhood, just the same way that we do with the other guests.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. So my given name is Catherine Noel Peterson, and so we share the Catherine, and I go by the Shara because I was actually given that name by another believer who, in our conversation, brought it up and felt like it was the thing to share. So, so I go by that on YouTube just because I thought it was really cool and I wanted to use that name. So whatever people want to call me is fine.
I love it. And like I said, I love that we share Catherine. I know that that's your first name and my middle name, but it's definitely a name that I'm fond of and that I love. So it's cool that we have that in common. So let's go back in time and let's talk about the family that you came from and your upbringing, and sort of what your family background looked like even before you were here.
Okay, so I was born in Los Angeles in 1975, and I would say I had, a fairly regular lower middle class upbringing. I lived in the same house since I was one, up and my parents had the house up until I was almost 40, so a long time in the same house. I would say that was a pretty, stable upbringing. We weren't moving around, didn't have all that kind of stuff, and attended the same church from when I was the same kind of age, very young. I was born and raised in a non denominational congregational church. So that was my background. And as far as I know, I don't have any specific type of like SRA abuse or anything like that. However, there is a lot of military in my family. My brother was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Navy, and he was in Vietnam, and he was in quote communications unquote, whatever that means. I never have gotten the story from him, and I would actually like to ask him one day. So that's like kind of a side thing that may, come back up later. But and then my grandfather, which is his dad, was in World War II as an Army medic. And then I have just all kinds of military on both sides of my family. So there could be things that I'm very unaware of because I know what the military brings in. But I literally I don't know. I don't know what to say. Um, and then other than that, I do have some things that I do know of on my dad's side. His sister's daughter, my cousin, she is in some kind of, I can never remember what the organization is. It's not the Eastern Stars, but it's something like that. And then on my mom's side, my uncle, her eldest brother, is in Rotary. So I do have ties that way. But my family, my immediate family, my parents, as far as I know, have never been in anything like that. So I've never been around any of that myself.
Gosh, it's interesting. Like I don't come from a family that has that background either, but you wonder like if at some point it did exist, and like if there was something that was going on in the past whenever you look at, your relatives or the generations that were here before you. And after learning about all of this, it's really easy to, be able to look at things now with a different lens and just be like, that's kind of an interesting pattern that's run through. It might not be the same generational stuff that's talked about on the show, but could it have been at one point? Or could there have been parts of it that like leaked down or were connected somehow? So that's a really fascinating um fact about you that you have so much of that interlaced in your family, even if it wasn't directly in yours or with your childhood. I should say. I'd be curious too to know what else sort of traveled up the lineage with some of those patterns.
Yeah, I'd be curious too, especially my brother, because he was in gate also like I was, and he's 2 years older. And I don't know what he was recruited into, but he is a mechanical engineer and he has worked for companies like Raytheon. And I know that he's worked for specific, things. I know that for a fact. Now, he can't talk about details and he's never broken, what he's not supposed to, but he has some kind of ties and I don't know what it is. So that's interesting.
Wow. And so for people listening, GATE, Gifted and Talented Education Programs, that's been a really hot topic lately. And you mentioned you and your brother were in it. Maybe you don't know what his experiences were, but would you mind talking about your experiences? What you
I
remember
I
from it?
I don't mind at all, but they're pretty boring. I really don't remember too much. I remember the first thing that I remember about it was because my brother's 2 years older. He got in gate, first, and I think he was in third grade, but I'm not positive. But I was in third grade when I first got in it, and I remember I just wanted to be like my brother. I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't really know that there was anything nefarious about it to this degree until just recently, especially when Gray shared, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And it all made sense though. It all made sense. So I do remember things like wearing the headphones and having like weird stories and stuff play. Um, Other than that, I honestly just don't remember anything else too weird. There would be like side groups that I'd be taken off into, and there'd be older children in it, and we'd be doing exercises. Because I excelled in the language arts parts of it, I do not do mathematics. That's my brother. We're like opposites. So he's highly mathematical, like incredibly intelligent that way. And then like I kind of got, the rest of it. So other than that, I really don't remember too much. It's pretty boring.
It's
So
so interesting just to know like what can happen in these programs and like what they are used for at the end of the day, kind of like the big picture. It's I wasn't in them. I was kind of like the antithesis of like a gifted child. I was like the class clown, the one that like teachers wanted to kick out of class and that was like failing classes. Um,
you're like my husband, which
which is
he's
just
very intelligent though, like you. So, they missed out.
I feel like the neurodivergency goes two ways. It can be like you're neurodivergent to where you're sort of like academically gifted and like really are passionate and like do really well at sort of the school stuff. And then I feel like there's the other side of it where you can almost like be smart and kind of bored of school and not being able to like sit still and so like you act out kind of. And like
Right,
both
right.
of them are kind of looked at as separate, if you're gifted on one end, you're taken out of class and and put in with other gifted kids and like treated good. And then if you're the other, you're kicked out of class and like put in detention. It's really interesting how they deal with kids. It's like, just let us be children. Like we're just supposed to be kids.
Oh yeah, but we know what they're doing. They have a whole crazy agenda, and it once you find out about it, I mean, you just can't ever unsee it. It's just the whole system is, completely not only broken but set up purposely to be that way, and it's terrible.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible. And you had since you were young, some health issues that plagued you your whole life, even up until now. And I'd love for you to talk about that because I know that that leads up to a really important part in your story. Because in I believe you had said that it began around age 14.
Right. Right. Before I was 14, I would say I was fairly healthy. I don't really remember ever having hospitalizations or anything. Like I literally was just a very capable, physically active, you know, not hyper, but very active child. And when I was 14, I very suddenly got ill and did not know until the next month what I had been battling with because I went through it the first time without any medical attention. And so I literally shouldn't have lived. I had toxic shock syndrome, and I just can't even explain to people, how bad it was. It was just one of the worst things. I Pretty much the worst thing I've ever been through. Definitely physically the worst thing I've ever been through. My fevers went up to 106. I was hallucinating. I don't remember a lot of it. My joints were all inflamed and red, and it was sepsis is what it is. It's your body. I had full body sepsis, and so, like I said, I literally shouldn't probably have. I couldn't find anybody who had had toxic shock syndrome and had not had medical attention and survived. To this day, I can't find anybody. I don't have like anybody to relate to. So the only ones I can find survivors are ones that had medical attention. So I lived through that, and then after I had it, almost like a third of my hair fell out, and the craziest thing with the soles of my feet and my palms of my hands, a giant layer of tissue, you know, like peeled up and sloughed off, but it was like huge. It was like really thick, and because it was killing like all parts of my body. And so I had the weirdest things happen. So I had to go back to school as a freshman. That's my freshman year, the picture right there. I had to go back to school as a freshman in this weird condition, and it was so hard. I'm dealing with trying to recover, and then I have to go back to school with like a bunch of you couldn't really see it. It wasn't like patches had fallen out, but still, you can imagine being a freshman in high school and trying to deal with all that trauma. And I didn't really understand what had happened. I didn't understand. So yeah, it was really bad.
Oh my gosh. And I am very unfamiliar with like I've heard of that. I see it on the inserts of, feminine products,
Right.
toxic shock syndrome, but you're right. Like I personally have never met anybody who's actually had it, and I haven't really understood how, I guess, lethal and fatal it can be. That's really scary to think about, and how many of us are susceptible to getting that potentially.
Yeah. And going down part of rabbit trail with that is I later in life found somebody who I called my healer for a time, and she was introducing me to all kinds of natural medicines. Some things I had heard of, some things I hadn't. And when I told her the beginning of my story and how my health changed, she was a registered nurse, and she got out of that and went the homeopathic way. And when she heard what I had, she had a whole thing to tell me. Yeah, she not only investigated it for herself, but she already knew that they were purposely putting things in tampons to give women, yes, yep, it's actually a proven thing too. And so she said that there's actually things that they put in tampons to purposely make women have, you know, health issues, whether it's the toxic shock syndrome, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
So,
that's so horrific. Holy smokes. Why am I not
yeah,
surprised though?
I know. Yeah, so she just validated like all these years of me because it was so many years later by the time I met her and finally getting to talk to somebody about she kept telling me over and over again, she's like, I can't believe you survived. It's amazing that you lived through this. She's like, you have a story and like people don't live to tell these stories. And she's like, you have to keep telling your story. So here I am trying to tell my story about how I lived through this. And it's just by the grace of God. There's no other reason why I lived because I don't know how I did. So,
Could you talk a little bit more about what it is? Because there's probably a lot of people like me who have heard it or seen it on an insert, but again, never met anybody with it. And so then thought, oh, it must just be so rare, which it sounds like it can be rare, but it's also something, like you said, maybe we all don't get that, but we could get cancer because of some of these things. Or there might be other ways that, like, these same things that can lead to shock syndrome are impacting a woman's body later on in life. Could you talk a little bit about like what the symptoms are, what you went through, and even how did you like what did you do to alleviate the symptoms as you were going through this, especially so young, and there's probably not many doctors really talking about ways to get through it outside of probably like medicating yourself to death. And I'd love to hear sort of how you did overcome that.
well, the first time I had it, because I had it two times, and the first time I had it, in consecutive months, like I said, I recovered and went back to school briefly. And then what happened was I got it again the same way. And this is what happened to me. Like literally 1 minute I was fine and I started feeling like I had basic flu symptoms. So I was achy. I was running a low grade fever. My throat hurt. I didn't feel very good. But then not 12 to 24 hours later, I'm deathly ill. I'm in bed. My fevers are going up to, like I said, about 106. I'm hallucinating because, I'm so ill that I can't keep consciousness in, the state that I'm in. I can't stay there. My throat hurt so bad. It was the worst sore throat. I can't even put it into words. Like I said, my joints got inflamed and they turned red. My blood pressure kept plummeting out. And so I would faint even just sitting, or if I would just sit up in bed, I would faint. Yeah, it was really, really, really bad. And quite frankly, I don't know why my parents didn't take me to, get medical attention, but because I've always been like a really strong child, a really strong person, I guess they didn't realize how bad I was. My mom thought I had the flu because our neighbor across the street, who was a year older than I was, she had just had the really bad flu. So my mom thought I had the same thing. So, I've tried to give grace, but I literally had such terrible symptoms. I don't know how they weren't seeing more of what was going on with me because I felt like I was like walking through hell. Like that's like I felt like I was like burning. Like it was terrible, terrible pain. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. And what was it that did it just resolve itself? Did you have symptoms after that? How did you treat it?
Well, the second time I got it, they did take me to my pediatrician who immediately, sent me to the ER, which happened to be across a walkway. And so thankfully that time I did have attention because who knows what would have happened. So I got sent to the pediatric unit because there was nobody there. And at that time, toxic shock syndrome was so new, even though they knew about sepsis to some degree, toxic shock syndrome in it of itself was so new, they didn't really know what to do or how to treat it. So they just put me on the strongest antibiotics they had. And I remember at the very beginning, like literally feeling so bad, like I couldn't handle like even just, being there. And I had mentioned to you that I had one incident happen where, because my total hospital stay for that was right around 3 days. So at the very beginning, I remember I couldn't handle the pain. I couldn't handle what was going on. And I had an out of body experience where I was at the top of my hospital room and I wasn't necessarily always looking down, but I was sometimes. And I didn't understand what that was. But it was me disassociating, obviously, because I wanted to get out of that situation. And so I would hear like the doctor talking to my parents saying, we don't know what to do. We're doing what we can, and we just have to just keep an eye on her. She's like stable right now, but they were telling them it doesn't look good. This looks really bad, and we're just letting you know. So, I remember that. And then I don't really remember too much else for like the whole first day and a half or so. But then all of a sudden, I made like a giant turnaround. And once again, just like the first time, I say, God saved me, Yahuwah saved me. And he must have again, because literally my health just completely turned around. I was able to start standing up and, walking around. And I was just all of a sudden just doing so much better. And it was literally a fast turnaround. And I remember like I had really good care there, but they were amazed. Like they didn't know, really what was going on or how I turned around. I just think it was all spiritual. So
Ooh, what a story. No wonder why people are like, I don't know how you survived. Like, you don't even know how you survived. The doctors were probably baffled too. Like, what in the heck just happened? How did she just like miraculously heal? What a divine intervention you had.
yeah, I mean, it's all, God. I didn't I didn't know what was going on. I was young enough where, even though I wasn't like a young child still, I look like this, like on the screen, but still, I was unawares of what the ramifications of all this meant. I remember when I was getting discharged and I got um my last, shot in the rear. So, but I remember the doctor was saying, okay, like to my mom, like very seriously. He's like, making sure she's listening. He's like telling her, you have to keep an eye on her. We have no idea what's going to happen, but she could have organ damage all throughout her body, and we just don't know what's going to happen. And it was really serious. I remember sitting there and I was trying to like be okay, but I was like, wow, this sounds like this is really bad. I didn't know. I just thought I was going to be okay. I didn't know that I was going to have long-term side effects. So, and I did. I noticed some of the things that I noticed right away was I had heat intolerance. I couldn't exercise the same way. I couldn't be out in the heat because this is in Southern California. This is near Los Angeles, so it gets extremely hot. And so I would have a lot of issues like that start happening. And I eventually had to stop working when I was right around 26. I was working as a dental assistant, and I eventually had to stop working because I couldn't function in my job. Not only did I not have anybody to back me up, so I had to be there every day. I couldn't even handle. I was only working 4 days a week, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it at all. It just became way too much. So that's kind of that whole health issue and what it led to.
Holy smokes, that is so terrifying. And to think that this beautiful girl that we're looking at, who would ever have guessed that looks like that would have been your best year ever? You're beautiful, you look happy, you're vibrant. Who would have ever guessed that this girl went through such a life and death experience in a sense at this young age? That is an incredible story that you overcame.
Yeah, it's just been it's been like one step at a time. Like I've just had all these symptoms pop up where, you couldn't necessarily, like you're saying, see it. And a lot of times people, would have a hard time believing what I was going through because they can't see it. And I know a lot of people in our community can understand this because a lot of things that we're going through don't necessarily show. And I'm just here to say that out of anybody, I believe people, like when I started listening to people telling their stories, more so than not, I'm always believing them because I have been through so much myself, even though it's different than what a lot of people have. I've been through so much myself and I can understand how they're feeling, even though it's a little bit different. My medical stuff that I've been through has been extremely traumatic. I've had so many doctors, not believe me. They have a lot of stuff to say and they think they know everything. They really, and a lot of them really do. Now, I've had some good practitioners too, but I just have to say, they just really don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to handle people who have major health issues. And so Up until now, I'm 48 and a half, and I hardly had any help from the allopathic system in general. There was very, very little that was actually done where I could tell that they just didn't know what to do. So some of them were trying, they were genuinely trying. And so I did go through a journey of being on some pharmaceuticals, but I never really liked them, and I tried to not be into that as much as possible. And so I did go on antidepressants at one point, and it was supposed to help with my pain, and of course, it never did. I tried a few of those. One of them was horrible. It was called Elavil, and I just called it evil because I literally felt like it completely like flipped a switch on me, and I just like turned into this like horrible person. So yeah, so I've had experience with a lot of different medications and a lot of different specialists, and it's just been quite a journey. And I'm out of it now, though. I don't participate in the allopathic care system unless I need to, unless there's an emergency, and even then, I really don't like to go if I ever don't have to. I just don't trust them. I don't like their ways. I'm with you. I like more the natural route and whatever I can do not only to support people who are in it, because I want to purchase things from them so that I'm supporting people that I believe in, but I want things that are actually good for me. I don't want to do things that are harmful. And I realized a long time ago that almost everything they're doing, all the stuff they're giving you is just causing more harm. And I don't need that. I need to get better. So,
Can you talk about your journey into realizing that? So many people go their whole lives and never come to that actualization. Was that something that you were sort of brought up to, like, were your parents sort of holistic, or where did that start in your journey where you really started to go down the holistic route, especially, I know we'll talk about some events that happened later on in your adult life that was frowned upon in a sense, sadly. But I'd love to hear your journey, how you got into looking at things like chemicals or prescription pills or toxins. When did that all start to shift in your life, and how did that look for you?
well, the I would say the biggest shift for me was, unfortunately, with my first daughter, I did vaccinate her because at that time she's almost 20, so it was that long ago. At that time, I had what I would say was all like the routine stuff with her. I had a hospital birth. They actually induced me, which I would never do now. I would never do that anything that I did then. I did it all completely different with my younger daughter. But so they induced me because I had preeclampsia and they were bullying me and scaring me and telling me, I needed to be induced or else there could be a problem with my child. All the usual. I'm sorry to say this, but all the usual stuff. So so I got induced and that whole thing was traumatic because of being induced because your body isn't ready to do it. You're forcing it to do something it's not ready to do. And so yeah, I vaccinated my daughter, my husband at the time, my ex-husband at the time. We decided to just do everything that all the doctors were saying to do. So she was vaccinated and what I started seeing was all these weird things happen to her. There was one incident where I saw her shortly after she had been vaccinated. She got extremely ill and she like kind of fell off the couch. She kind of rolled off the couch because, she was so sick and not feeling well. And I was like starting to put it together then that, this can't be right. These vaccines, I'm like, these vaccines cannot be right. I'd already heard some about them at that point, and that's when I decided to really start looking into it. So I would say right around 18 years ago to 17 years ago is when I really started to dive into it. And that's what started it was my vaccine damaged, very obviously vaccine damaged daughter. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about more about this because I know that this leads, to sort of the other side of the coin where you really turned all that around and were persecuted for it, basically. But let's talk about between 19 and meeting your first husband. Anything significant in there, and then definitely want to talk about how you got into that first marriage and like around what age that was, and around that part of your life, what you were doing.
Well, the other thing that did happen was I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was right around 20 or 21, really
Wow.
young. Yes, because I had really terrible symptoms coming into that. And a lot of times I just tried to like live with it, and I wouldn't say necessarily hide it, but I didn't really understand how bad it was until it got to the point where it was affecting my life. Like I was having trouble working at that time, even at that young age. Even though it was still, 5 or 6 more years till I had to like literally, I had to get out of my field because it was just too much. But yeah, so I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and the doctor that I went to was one of the big time more, he wasn't, I wouldn't say he wasn't a holistic doctor, but he was trying to do things more naturally. And so I went to him, and so I was already like, my feet kind of into the natural side of it, but not all the way. So I didn't go on like any kind of medications. I was only taking, it was a well, it was one medication. It was called guaifenesin, which is an expectorant, which is found in like cough medications. So I was doing this whole protocol with that, but that's what I consider like my, beginnings of the more natural things. So thankfully, like all along, I wasn't doing like super heavy pharmaceuticals, which that's good. I did some here and there, like I mentioned, but I was never on like long term because they put people on like the craziest things, that. So I'm very thankful that I didn't like, get too much into that, except for, like I told you, I started taking prednisone. I was first given that by a doctor, a different doctor. I think I was about, I can't remember the exact age, but it was somewhere in my 20s. It was somewhere in my 20s because I had gone on and off of it for a very long time. And my response to it was unfortunately really good. So I thought, oh, this is a good drug. Like, this is good for me. This is helping me. That's like one of the most dangerous drugs that you can take because there's such a fine balance between it actually doing something helpful and it not. And like I said, I'm to the point now where I don't want to partake in any of that stuff. I just think it's all just terrible, you know. And I'm not judging anybody who takes anything. I'm just saying, like, from my experience, from my research, from everything I look into, I want to stay away from all that stuff as much as possible. So I took the prednisone on and off for years. I wasn't on it steady. There would be times when I would have more symptoms, and so I would go on it. But yeah, it was to help my symptoms. It was a form of, because what they thought was going on was that I had what is it called when your body attacks itself, when you have those, the autoimmune. They thought
Autoimmune.
I had, yeah, because they diagnosed me with fibromyalgia and then said you have some unspecified autoimmune illnesses. And so because that medicine was working for me, they're like, well, you must, because this is working for you, it's helping you, and you can function better on it. So it makes sense because it's suppressing that part of your body that's attacking itself. So anyway, so I got to the point where I had been off of it for a while. I hadn't taken it. I don't think I had taken it for about a year and a half or two. And I got some really terrible symptoms. And this was right around 8.5 years ago. So I went to a doctor, and this was when I was in Texas. So I went to a doctor and got a prescription for that. And he actually diagnosed me. I had been trying to get a diagnosis for years, but because I had been unable to work and I had, like Medicare, Medicaid, I was hardly finding any help. It was hard just to get into doctors. So anyway, this doctor diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis because I had been battling those kind of symptoms for, at this point, literally decades. And I don't like having that diagnosis. I've since like thrown it all away, but at least he was trying to do his part. He, genuinely seemed like he cared, and he gave me another prescription of prednisone. Well, along with this timing, I had found what I mentioned earlier, my healer. I found a woman in the natural groups that I was in on Facebook, and she reached out to me. And then we started talking on the phone, and that's how I started learning a lot about, actually how your body functions. And the difference between the allopathic care and the other side, all the natural. So she started helping me and she told me that the medication that I was on wasn't good, and she was trying to help me, and she was giving me different things like, the colloidal silver. She had like a special type of it that was ozonated, and a whole bunch of different therapies like that that were actually good for my body. And but what happened, because I was taking that prednisone, is I had a night, like you mentioned earlier, where I called the night. I don't quite know what happened. It was the craziest spiritual battle I have ever had, you know, like where you can like see things going on. And what happened was I was on the phone with my friend, and all of a sudden something like flipped inside of me, and I must have been spiritually attacked because I started saying things that weren't natural for me. Not only was I on the prednisone and it was doing something to me, something else was like going on. And I still to this day am not sure. But I go to wake up my parents because my daughter and I are living with my parents at this time. We had been for almost 9 years. She's 12. This is my older daughter. My younger daughter's not, she's not born yet. So so I go wake up my parents and I start saying some kind of bizarre things, and I kind of know I'm being off, but I don't really know what's going on. And they are like really concerned, and they really start, you know, like negatively reacting to me because I was actually like in a really good mood and being really positive, but they at this point we had already been having differences of opinions of our routes where we were going spiritually. So they already didn't like what I was doing a lot of. And so this was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And so what ended up happening, and I don't mind sharing this part, and I really don't care what people think about this, but what ended up happening was somehow along the way, they got my daughter in their bedroom with them and had locked their door. And I was, of course, very angry about it because they had my daughter in there and I didn't want them to have my daughter. And I started screaming and trying to, get through the door, their bedroom door. And the whole house was shaking, and I thought it was gonna it felt like an earthquake because I came from Southern California where we had earthquakes, and it felt like an earthquake. And I thought it was just me experiencing it, Emma. But my daughter told me about maybe like 3 or 4 weeks later that she felt it too, and there was something going on. There was, and I think it was the angels that were battling. I'm just gonna be honest. Now, like, with where I'm at with how I see things, I think there was a massive, like, spiritual battle going on, and because I was on the prednisone and I was also taking cannabis at the time, I think there was a major spiritual battle going on, like, because I was trying to break through into things that were actually helpful for me and really good for me, and there was just this just crazy chaos going on. And so that night ended up I went in and out of consciousness. I do not know a lot of what happened, and I still to this day don't. And that's okay. I'm okay with not knowing everything. But I ended up waking up on my parents' bed, and there was police officers there, and the paramedics were already there too. And one of the police officers said some really weird things to me, and I was saying weird things too. But he was telling me some really weird things, and I still to this day don't know if he was trying to calm me down or if he actually saw something. I don't know. But he said to me, "You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen in the whole world." And I was like, "What is wrong with this guy?" I'm like, "This is weird." Because like I knew I was having issues, but this was weird for a police officer to say some like, off the cuff comments. I'm like, I'm kind of like looking around at this point, like, does anyone else hear? And he had his partner next to him, and I knew he heard what was going on, but I don't even know what to tell you. I don't know. I still to this day, because I never got a chance to ask him if he remembers saying that or what was going on. I don't know, but it was weird. So they ended up taking me by ambulance with the police officer in there with me in handcuffs to a hospital, to an emergency department. Yeah. So,
Wow. Okay.
that was the night.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're gonna unpack some of this. So first of all, thank you for sharing that. That
Yeah.
is really intense to think about going through all of that and sort of not even being in your right mind in some ways and not really understanding why. And then the house shaking stuff. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to talk about your journey into cannabis and what led you there, because this will end up being a part of your story that we're going to go next. Talk about cannabis, what it did for you, why you decided to go that route, and a little bit about your journey with it.
Well, at this point, I already was pretty aware that I wanted to completely get out of the allopathic care system. You know, it was a last ditch effort because I was having trouble walking. That's why I went to the doctor and got put on the prednisone. I regretted it after. I really would like to have not have done that because I was already doing some things that were, natural care and that were good for me. And I probably should have just been more patient. But because I was losing my ability to walk, it really scared me. And I'm like, I can't lose my ability to walk. I want to be able to function. So I made a mistake. I went to the doctor and, got on the prednisone. But at the same time, I had also just found people who would ship me what's called FICO, full extract cannabis oil, and I loved it. It was the first time that I took something that actually helped me. Like, it was amazing. My pain was a lot less. I had more energy. I could do things. I felt what I would say, more normal again, how I had wanted to for years. And so I have all these things going on simultaneously. So I'm taking, the cannabis at the time that all this stuff happens and I have to go to the hospital. So what ends up happening is obviously the police know all about it. And I had told my parents thinking, and that was another mistake. I should never have told them that I was taking it because I kind of pretty much knew how they'd feel about it. I knew that they wouldn't support me, but I was trying to be honest because I was living in their home. And after about 3 weeks, when I saw really good results, I, kind of naively thought, oh, I'm going to share with them how excited I am. I'm doing better and they're going to be excited too. No, no, it wasn't that case. And, I can't blame them. They're on their own journey. They see things their own way. You can't expect other people to agree with everything you do. But I had at least hoped for some kind of support and been, like, oh, hey, you're finding something that works, like, because they had seen my health journey, my mom especially, she knew more than anybody what I had been through, and she had wanted me to be better for decades too. And so I thought I was going in a good direction with them and with everything, but it was not. I already knew things were stressful, but I just kept having hope that things were going to be okay with them, that we were going to get better, we were going to get through it, they were going to be supportive, it was going to be all right, but it wasn't. And so that, because of what happened that night, I had to go turn in all of my cannabis to the police. It was part of a deal. They opened a CPS case on me because I had been taking that, and they thought I could be a danger to my daughter. Yeah, specifically for the because of the cannabis. Yes. And the really sad thing is they didn't even really discuss with me the fact that I had been on prednisone, and that's actually what caused me to have all those terrible symptoms. And probably the cannabis kept me grounded and doing better than I would have. It could have been really bad if I wouldn't have had that. So I'm so thankful that I had found that at the same time. Because when I went into the emergency department that night, I don't remember a lot of it, but I saw part of my records after, and it was really bad. Like, all of my levels were completely messed up. They had to shock my heart back into rhythm. There were terrible things that were going on. And they sent me to the mental health unit after that with no paperwork, with nothing on me. That was a really bad talk about being persecuted for trying to do, you know, natural ways and what your beliefs are. That was like the beginning of like my view of like, man, people are really persecuted sometimes for, their choices. Now I know what it's like. Now I can see it. And um so I had to turn the cannabis back in because of all that. And I didn't partake in it in my parents' home again because I felt like that would be, disrespectful. I tried to respect them even though I didn't see things their way, but I did start to take it again later because it, like I said, it was one of the things that was helping me. And along with kratom too. I didn't really mention that, but I found kratom right around the same time and had been using that, especially for pain, but it also helps with my energy level too. And so that's another natural thing that is in my arsenal that I still use that to this day, especially. Um, but yeah, the CPS case that happened because of it was pretty ridiculous. Was the typical, they have a caseworker come in and, you know, basically just invade my life and try to act like they know what's right and what's not and try to make me feel bad for taking the cannabis. And I really stood up for myself, and I told her, I tried to be as non confrontational as I could, with along with really sticking up for the truth. And I just told her, I said, you know what? And she was actually part Native American, so I could like really tap into that with her. And I just told her, I said, that that medicine is actually good. I said I was using that as medicine, and she actually even admitted it to me in our talking. Um, but that case turned into a whole issue later on, which I don't even think I brought this part up to you. But I started going through this whole thing with just all these different relationships in my life. So I would have, different people I was talking to because of where I was going, in my spiritual beliefs, in my religion, that kind of thing. And then there was just a whole bunch of things going on. And one thing that happened was I started talking with this guy who I'm not going to talk about who he is because I don't want to go down that route. But I will just say that it turned into a really bad situation. He ended up being like this total psychopath, like literal, like he almost, yeah, it was really bad. Um, and so what happened about a month and a half after the first hospitalization that I had was I felt unsafe because I had cut things off completely with this guy who I had never even talked to him on the phone. We didn't have like a relationship, but it was somebody who I was talking with that I was interested in. And then when I realized what like a creep he was, and I cut things off completely with him, he said a lot of horrible things to me, like um I hope something bad happens to you, and like all these things. Like I still have screenshots of it somewhere. But what I ended up doing was I ended up going to the police myself to see if I needed to do like a restraining order against him or what. Even though he was like a couple states away, I felt honestly unsafe because he had said some like crazy stuff. And one of my friends had said, you know what? If you feel like you should go to the police, you probably should. So that's what I did one day. And it was actually Black Friday. So it's really easy to remember. It was the day after Thanksgiving. And so I go to the police and I'm telling them what's happening, showing them, screenshots and just saying, hey, I just don't feel safe. There's this guy that I don't really know much about. I just had talked to him basically, in text messages, and this is where it's at. And this is where it gets weird. So I'm in the police station, in the room with the police officers doing this. And some other officers come in that are not of the city police where I am. This is in my city where I live in Texas. And I don't know who these people are. And they come in and I can't remember if they're called sheriffs there, whatever it is. They're like a special unit. They come in and they start interrogating me about some stuff. And I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. I'm like thinking that the guy that I'm there about called in, because he like kind of has connections and stuff, and he's in IT. And so I'm like, well, maybe he, you know, called these people in on me and made up some lies about me. I have no idea. I literally have no idea. But I finished talking to them there, and they asked me some like weird questions, and I'm thinking, I this is something is just so off. But I leave anyway because they don't say they have to do anything more. They just had to question me and make sure, I don't know. And so I go back home, and then I hear a knock on the door about an hour or so later, and I know it's them. I just know it's them because I already have like these, you know, I already have these kind of like inklings that happen with me anyway, and I know it's them. And sure enough, it is. And that's where that situation turned into them taking me to a mental health facility. And There was nothing wrong. There was no reason for them to do it. They actually lied on my intake papers, and I didn't know it at the time because that was hidden from me. They lied on my intake papers and said that I threatened to go, take my daughter and live under a bridge and run away. I was like, "Oh my gosh, who cares if I had even said that?" I mean, so I'll go do that, whatever. But I had never said anything like that to them. In fact, I had told them that I was a little bit worried about, some of the things that had been going on, and my dad had been acting kind of, weird. There was a lot, like I had told you, going on. And so, um, so yeah, so I was talking in the front room of my parents' house with one of the police officers, and my parents were in their back room talking with the other one. Whatever they had done, their little, thing, I still do not know who called these cops on me. I don't know if it was the guy that I had the problem with or if it was my parents when I left the house and said that I was gonna go to the police station. I don't know. I still to this day don't know. But regardless, somebody called this special, team in, and they ended up forcing me to go to this mental health facility place. And I kept telling them, I stayed really calm, and I kept telling them, I said, "I don't need to go there. You don't need to take me there." I'm like, "What? Why are you determining to take me somewhere? I've never threatened. I've never, threatened myself. I've never threatened anybody else." They never gave me a reason why they were taking me. They said, "You have to do this. This is what you have to do." And so I ended up going into a mental health facility place for 10 days where I was literally held against my will and saw the treatment of people in there, which is pretty terrible. Some of the staff was pretty cool. Some of the staff was horrible. The doctors were a complete joke for the most part. And once again, only by the grace of Yahuwah did I get out of that place because I was there and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why. I kept asking him, "Why am I here? What do you want me to do? What is going on?" It was so weird.
Woo, holy smokes. What a crazy amount of just random events that have happened in your life that like don't seem related to anything, so I don't want to say don't seem related to anything going on in your life, but it's like these really random things happen to you and you seem like at the times that it happened, it just sort of happened out of the blue. This wasn't things that you were anticipating happening, not things that like made sense with what was going on in your life. And for you to be put in to be admitted around that time had to have just been horrifying for it. Did they tell you, like, what did they say when you got there? What did they say that they were treating you for?
Well, first of all, the police officer that took me in his vehicle was laughing the whole time and playing like inappropriate music. And so I already knew going into this that this was so sketchy. I'm like, these guys they're not doing what's right. I already knew that they were doing something really bad. And so I'm like expecting the place that I'm going to just I have to be on guard the whole time. I'm like constantly in prayer asking for help. So what happened was the intake, apparently they were really busy. So I sat around for a really long time in the front offices, and they eventually brought me a laptop, and I did, like an interview like this with a psychologist, with a shrink. And he was the creepiest looking guy ever. I can't even remember his name. So he decides to diagnose me in 15 minutes that I'm bipolar and that I need to be there. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I'm like, how do places do this and think that this is okay and that people aren't gonna be like, "What are you doing?" I didn't admit myself there. I was forced there by the police, so I couldn't get out of there. So I basically just had to stay calm and go along with everything that was going on. But one mistake I did make that I wish I would have known, and I want to tell this to other people, is when they take you to a place like this and they're forcing you to do something, yes, stay calm, but do not sign their paperwork. Tell them, "I am not going to sign your paperwork because I do not agree to this, and I am not here because I want to be here." I would not have signed the paperwork, if that happened today. So I did sign paperwork, which that's how they get people to agree to things that you never knew about because they will hide information and pretend like they disclosed it to you, but they didn't. That's why I didn't know. that I was agreeing to my paperwork saying I was a threat, that I had, threatened to take my daughter and go live under a bridge, which is just asinine. I would I would never. But that was on my intake paperwork from the police who took me there. And
Oh
then I just
my gosh.
yeah, and then I had to deal with them constantly trying to get me on medication. They eventually forced me to take medication. They said, "Either you take this medication or we're gonna give you a shot of the medication. It's your choice." And I was like, "Whoa, this is just intense. Like, I'm being forced to at this point." So I did. I took it, but thankfully, because I made a deal with the medical doctor, she was actually pretty cool. Um, it was the psychologist who was forcing me to take it. The medical doctor wasn't having me do any of that stuff. That was actually a whole blessing in and of itself. But so the psychologist was forcing me to take it, and I took it one time, and he said, "If it doesn't help you or if you have an adverse reaction, then you don't have to take it again. Let's just try it once." And I'm thinking, okay, if this is how I get these people to not like force inject me, okay. And I did. I took it once, and then they were true to their word. They didn't make me take it again. Um, but the other things that went on in there, quite frankly, they mistreated patients, and I saw it in front of my eyes. They just left us to our own devices very often. We would just be sitting in the common room, not doing anything, just watching TV, literally like not having anybody help us. And I'm like, what is the point of these places? This is insane. Like they're not even we're in an insane place, and there's more insanity going on, like literally right in my face. Like there's people who have major problems, who are out of control, who need help, who are barely getting any kind of help. And it was so sad to see, because then I had a couple of other people who were there who were um very obviously like mentally at a very younger age than their body was. Like there was this one lady who she acted like a child, and I mean, it was just, girl, I mean, the things I saw there, I was like, "Oh my gosh." So I just tried to keep my head down. I tried to go along with what they were telling me to do. I tried to do my best to stand up for myself. I talked to their patient advocate, which of course he didn't help me at all. I was just trying to get out the whole time. I'm like, I don't belong here. I'm like, you guys aren't doing anything to help me. I'm like, I tried to not, verbally say that as much as I could. I knew I had to like, act right. But man, I mean, those places are just so I know there's some good doctors who have good intentions, who things, do go well, but this was not one of those places. So,
Oh my goodness.
yeah. And
I
then
relate to you so much. I was really, really sick as a child and like in and out of the hospital and like wasn't able to play sports like other kids. I would just have
Mm,
asthma attacks all the time, and I sort of went like a route similar to you of switching my lifestyle eventually and self-reflecting and being like, okay, so my doctors have me on 1,000 medications. I've literally been sick my whole life. It's not helped. I still can't be active. I still can't function normally. Like maybe what I need to do is something that they're not telling me, right? And I know like along the way, me just changing my life over into like just simply like eating healthy, exercising, like you, switching to things like cannabis instead of all the over the counter and prescription pills that I was consuming all the time. I remember how weird I felt doing that because everybody treated me like I was strange for being healthy. Like it was I wanna compare it to, like I saw this meme before where it was like, "It's interesting that we have to pay more for, like, organic food when, like, that should just be food." Like, we have to
right.
actually go seek out real food. Everything that we have, like, isn't
Yes.
real, you know? And it made me
Yes.
feel that way. I'm like, "How weird that, everybody looks at me like I'm, like, this outcast now?" And I feel strange, like, doing, like, what my body's intended to do, which is, like, to be healthy.
This world is so inverted. You're so right, though. It is. They unfortunately push a narrative that causes all the natural goodness, for the most part, to be looked at as something bizarre and dangerous. And oh, don't do this. So,
You're
yeah,
gonna
it is. It's
die if you rely on your immune system, take all these pills instead, and it's like, "Wait a minute, like, why?" I get it, like, Western medicine can be great, especially, like, say that you had a flare-up for, shock syndrome. Like maybe that saved, maybe like there could have been something that's for somebody else that could save their life. That's like a Western medicine intervention. Who knows? Right?
Right.
Like the system makes you like rely on it. And when you don't, they're like, why aren't you relying on us? Like we're the only answer. And it's like, wait, like this should be like a temporary thing, you know? And I see that so much with your story that like you were really into trying to better yourself, your family, you're looking into other options, you're questioning your own belief systems and like what you did with your first daughter, um, with uh getting her her I'll just call them shots, I guess, you know,
Yes.
and it's like,
Sorry, I said the other word
oh no,
before.
you're good, you're good. But it's like, man, how weird that like, you trying to do all of this like had all these negative consequences in your life over and over and over again where you were treated like an outcast almost or like you're crazy when like your whole journey was centered on doing the right thing and like researching and like trying to find your way out of that system, and you were like prosecuted for it over and over and over again in these really bizarre ways.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely how I've come to look at it too. And, like I said, I still don't have the facts about a lot of what happened, but I have a basic picture about what was going on because there are so many things that we don't see going on around us all the time. There is a spiritual world where we, for the most part, don't have the vision, to see with these eyes. Maybe we can get parts of it from our other senses, but we don't have the total picture. We just don't. And so, yeah, I completely agree that there is just this battle going on to really steer us in one basic direction, and we have to learn how to shut off that narrative and really pay attention to what the truth is. Pay it, like you said, listen to our body. What is actually working? What's helping me? What's good for me? What's good for my family? Because that's all I've ever tried to do. And getting, harsh behavior and getting persecuted for it has been so weird. But then it's helped me to relate to other people because all through my life, I had seen other people who have been through things, and I don't think I had really personally felt it that much. I had seen it, a tiny bit, but until I got into trying to get out of their systems and like I tried to pull my older daughter out of school too. Like I said, it turned into this whole thing with me and my parents. And then going back to the place that I was in for the 10 days, my parents, while I was in there, decided to use the court system, to use the legal system to take temporary custody of my daughter from me. And I was in a place where I literally had no access to any help. I I was trying to call my cousin who worked for a law office, but that's actually the law office that they used, which I figured that's what they did, but I just didn't, you don't know till you try. So I had nobody to help me. Um, I could barely even find out like what to do. They had made a court case. I didn't even know if I was going to get out of there on time to make the court date, and I did. I got out of there, but I had no help. I didn't have time. I tried to look for some legal help, but I didn't have to. I had like a day and a half or two in between getting out to having to, make an appearance. So basically, the whole thing was I went to court. I didn't have anybody there with me helping. It was me. And their lawyer approached me before our time came, and I thought I had been praying about it, and I thought, I don't want to go in front of this judge. I have a feeling if I go in front of the judge, it could go bad. I don't know why, but I had that sense. And so I thought, if I can get out of this anyway, I'm going to, pay attention to what's going on and try. So sure enough, their lawyer came up to me and said, you don't have to go in front of the judge if you don't want to. And he laid out this whole thing where, if you just leave your daughter in your parents' custody for now, and there's all these stipulations that you can go through later to try to regain custody of her. You can do this. Well, the only reason I went for it, I didn't want to, but I had no job. I had no support. I had nowhere to live. What was I going to go in front of a judge and say when my parents own their home? They're financially stable. They have everything to say to make me look like a bad person and them look like the stable people. And Emma, I knew it. And so I thought, okay, I have to do this because I don't want to get into a thing between my parents. I don't want to start going to court. I'm going to have to trust that even though I think that what they're doing is horrible, I think that they're actually doing it because they actually think it's right. And I'm not excusing them for their bad behavior, but I'm just having to go along with it because I don't want there to be more problems, you know? So I did. So I went along with it, and I released, signed the paperwork and said, Yeah, I don't like this, but I agree to it." And what I ended up having to do was I wanted to stay around the area where my daughter was, and I tried. I tried shelters, I tried like everything I could. I couldn't find any way to stay, like every door closed. So I reluctantly listened to the fact that I might have to go somewhere else, and I reached out to people that I didn't even know that well, because I was like, at this point, I just need somewhere to stay. I was in a motel that I could only afford for like a couple more days. It was like all my money, and I had to go somewhere. So I ended up going to Alabama because that's where I was offered, a room. And I felt like, okay, I was like, this feels like safe. This feels like the place to go. I didn't like it because it was far away from my daughter, but it was basically, my whole life starting over again. And that is what happened. I I started all over again. I was there with her for just under a year, and in that time, I met my now husband, and it's just, to me, it's just been a blessing because all the hard things that I've been through have ended up being worth it in the end because, I have my husband and we have our daughter. We have a whole life together where at one point in my life, I didn't think I would ever have anything again. I had given up on marriage, because my first marriage completely fell apart. And we were only together for 3 years, and then I had to leave him because that was a whole other story. And I thought we were gonna, get back together. I thought we were gonna reconcile. That's what I always wanted. I never got married, thinking that divorce was a possibility. I wanted to stay married, and it didn't work. And it was for the best, but it was really hard. And so I was single for almost a whole decade. I didn't date. I didn't want to date. I just focused on my daughter. My health was an issue, so I focused on my daughter. I tried to focus on my health, and so as difficult as it was that things went bad with my parents and I lost custody of my older daughter, my life has really turned around, even though it's still been really hard. I've just seen the hand of God just directing me places that I could never imagine and never get to on my own. So
That is incredible. And to think that like something so scary, like moving to a different state, all this uncertainty that you're going through, and being betrayed by your own family, while you're going through some of the hardest things of your life. And it's so confusing, what's going on around you. And then to think that that led you to the love of your life is such a divine intervention and like a beautiful, happy ending to such a horrific chain of events that happened to you.
yes, amen, sister. It totally has just, it doesn't necessarily completely remove the pain. It's been the worst thing being separated from my older daughter. That's never going to change. That's always going to be hard. But there is redemption. There is still life outside of those things, and I just want to encourage other people going through, being separated from a child or something else similar. I mean, as hard as it is, I will never say that my younger daughter replaces her, that anything is a replacement, but to me, there's always hope. I still have hope that my older daughter and I are going to reconcile. I still have hope that things are going to be better, that one day it's going to be better. Right now, it's not okay. Right now, I really don't know what to do about it. Like I said, she's almost 20, and she can make her own decisions. She always could. I always left the door open and told her, that I was always there. I didn't think that it would ever go this way. I didn't think I'd ever be separated from her like this, but she, didn't want to talk to me. She didn't want a relationship, so I didn't push, because if I'm going to push her to have a relationship with me, what does that show? and I had to get, quite frankly, I had to get myself together. I was trying to get my health in order. I was trying to do a little bit of work so I could have some money, which I hadn't done for, a long time at that point. I mean, I hadn't worked since I was 26. And so this was 13 years later. So, it was a hard time. And like I said, it wouldn't have been so hard if my health wouldn't have been so difficult. But you know what? Somehow, day by day, I kept making it, and I got a job at Pizza Hut temporarily for a while, and it gave me some finances. And like I said, shortly after that, I got married to my husband, and um, then he just came in the room.
I have
And
you.
then we had our then we had our daughter, which is just amazing because with all the things I've been through, one of the things that I had after my first daughter was I had a surgery, um, where I kept getting ovarian cysts, and I had part of one of my ovaries removed. And so it was like questionable, like, was I even going to be able to have a child again? And I was older when I had my second child. And I mean, I'm just telling women, you can do it if you want to do it naturally, even if you have difficult health. I had difficult health, and I didn't do any care. I didn't do any allopathic care at all. I didn't do anything because I didn't want to. I wanted to do it like all the old-fashioned way. That's what I felt led to do. That's what I felt was good for me and my child, and our child. My husband agreed. And so, I did a water birth, and our little tiny fifth wheel that we were renting from a family that had been helping us. And so that was like totally crazy. That led to my second CPS case where I had to go to the hospital because I had really bad bleeding. It wasn't just from my tear, there was like internal bleeding. It was probably, I think my placenta tore after I gave birth because it was a short umbilical cord. And I think that that's what happened, but I'm not positive. But it was like a horror show. And so the women that were there, there was one woman helping me first, and she brought her daughter in who was a nurse. So I did have, it was an unassisted birth, but I did have care. I had people looking over me too. I wasn't like doing this without any help especially because of my health. And so I had to transfer in because I had bleeding, unresolved bleeding, and I needed stitches. So I go by ambulance to the hospital. And this is just for me. This is not supposed to be for my child. She's fine. There was nothing wrong with her. I decided to give birth to her the way I wanted to, and she was perfectly healthy. There was not anything that they needed to ever say, but of course they did. They pushed all of their care that they wanted to do. They tried to bully me into things that I didn't want to do because they were trying to tell me that I had to have a blood transfusion because of all the blood I had lost. But I was stable, and they didn't even have to put me on anything, because I wasn't fainting. I had fainted once. I wasn't fainting anymore. Um, and so they ended up reporting me because when they went through their whole list of questions, I was too honest because it was on record from my previous case that I had been on cannabis. So I wanted to be honest. I didn't want them to have anything against me. So I said, yes, I used medical, I told them what I did. They ended up reporting me because of that. And I know it's because I did a home birth. Emma, I know that. They didn't like what I did. So that whole case was actually pretty fast, and there was no like court system involved. We didn't have to do anything like that. They didn't actually try to take our daughter away from us. Thank Yahuwah. All we had, and actually, like I wrote to you, the the caseworker we had ended up reporting the hospital saying they never should have reported you. I'm going to report them for their misuse of the system. And so I felt like we were actually given, even though it was another trial, we were given somebody who was on our side, who understood what we were going through. She used a lot of natural methods too. And she couldn't believe, she's like, I don't understand why they reported you. She's like, keep telling me what happened. I'm like, nothing happened. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like everything was fine. Like, I don't even know why. And she's the one who told me, because you disclosed to them that you had taken in the past, medical marijuana, they decided that that's what they were going to report you for. So thankfully, all we had to do was go see our caseworker a couple times, and then go to a pediatrician with our newborn, and that was the end of that. That's it. That was it. So, but it was the same thing again that other people have been through, where you're wrongfully reported for something. You did nothing wrong. Your child was never in danger. There was nothing going on. It was just, yeah, it was so unnecessary. What a waste of money, you know?
Oh my gosh. It's horrible too because you look at the kind of mom culture, and this isn't to like pick on moms. Like I can speak to like I'm not I have alcohol once in a while and stuff like that too, but like you see these moms and like they have no problem like saying like, "Oh, I drink a bottle of wine every night," or like I take my Xanax, you know.
Right.
There's like this culture of like mothers do need some type of relief. Like it's not forgiving being a mom these days. Like moms are not treated in society like they're to be nurtured. It's like, okay, you had a kid, hurry up, get your body perfect, get back to work, perform, 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 like get back, like don't be a mom basically. They like try to pull you away from being a mom as quick as possible. And I think there's, this toxic culture where like moms are it's cool to like drink wine and have Xanax as a mom, but like when it comes to something like cannabis, moms are instantly, "Oh, well, that's gotta be dangerous. You're high, like,
Yeah.
your kid?"
Right.
And it's like, I feel like when you find a cannabis strain or product that works for you, like, it doesn't work against you the way alcohol does and make you act a fool, basically. Like, it
Yes.
makes you more of who you are.
Yes,
It brings you
girl.
back to
Yes.
who you are, and it makes you better at the things that you do. Like, I credit that so much with, like, being able to even do this. People ask me all the time, like, how do you stay so stable, like listening to all these testimonies? And it's like, well, obviously my faith, like my relationship with God, I have an amazing partner. I have a great support system. I have people like you, and the rest of the listeners. Like, I have a really amazing circle and community and like a lot of really great things to lean on. But like for my own mental health, my own personal care, cannabis, exercise, eating good, like all of that is in there too. And I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do and like be a high performer without them. And there's no way that I could consume alcohol at all. And like that would bring me down to a low frequency and like I wouldn't be
Right.
to be
Right.
the best
I'm
of
the
who I
same
am.
way. I'm exactly the same way. I actually have an alcohol intolerance. I was an alcoholic, and I didn't bring this up, but I have no problem bringing it up. I was an alcoholic for almost 2 years trying to treat my symptoms when I was in my, let's see, I must have been right around my early 30s, somewhere around 13, 14 years ago, where I tried to self-medicate for a while. So at night I would do it. Wasn't doing it during the day. But girl, it was like the worst thing I could have done because even before that, I already had an alcohol intolerance where it would make me flush. I would get really hot. I would sweat profusely. So this was like a really terrible thing that I was doing. So I can attest to the fact that, somebody who's trying to medicate themselves with that, especially when you have underlying health issues, yeah, it's really bad. It was really bad for me. I am so thankful I got away from it. And now, we very occasionally have wine, but yeah, we try to do the things that are safe and effective and that aren't going to harm anybody around us. And especially myself, I am all into, okay, what's the best choice for, my body? What's the best choice for, that's just gonna be helpful. And the funny thing about my home birth, I wasn't even partaking in any of that stuff at the time. So they didn't even at the time have any reason to do what they did because I was literally doing nothing, nothing. I wasn't taking anything. I didn't do anything for, my birth process. I didn't take anything from them after. And that was actually the ironic part of it was I was completely off of anything at the time, and I could have really used, like you're saying, I could have really used the pain relief and the mental, spiritual, all the aspects that are to me relieved because I have the same kind of relief from cannabis. It is so helpful, and I'm really thankful that I've gotten back into it now because for a while they did try to like bully me away from it and scare me away from it. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like I don't want to. put in jeopardy my family. And then I'm like, well, wait, there is a way to do it, and you can be, safe about it. And so that's what I do now. And I am so thankful for the natural things that that God has given us, because they are amazing. Plants over pills like any day. I am so, that person. But I don't really push it. It's just, my lifestyle. And like I said, I would never try to talk anybody else into it, but I'm sure going to tell you what I do, and hey, this helps me, this is my story. So,
Which I love. You're
yeah.
giving a voice to a lot of people. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that, survivors especially, that use cannabis as a coping mechanism and are too afraid to talk about it publicly because they're afraid to be met with, people bullying them and like I said, it's so sad. Like when I go back to, how it's portrayed on social media, I can go on Instagram and see these moms doing, TikToks, these little short videos of like, we're drinking wine tonight, and like it's cool and it gets like a million likes. And then the accounts that I see where moms are talking about cannabis, like their entire account is trying to convince their listeners that it's okay, like because
Yeah.
it's not looked at as okay. It's like a whole different vibe. It's like cool to have alcohol. If you talk about cannabis, you have to like fight to get people to accept that that's something that works for you. And again, like I don't push it either and say it's for everybody. It's not for everybody. I've met people that have had horrible reactions off of it, right?
Yep. So have I.
But when
Mm-hmm.
I look at my own life, and like you said, speaking personally, when I look at, I was so sick when I was taking a million pills. Like that was what my doctor had me do. And I still have side effects to this day as an adult that I deal with,
Mm,
from that. And
yeah.
including my growth was stunted from all the stuff that I was on. I was supposed to be 5'11" and I'm only 5'2" because I was on so many
Mm,
drugs and steroids that it shrunk me. Right.
yes,
And,
girl. Shame
and
on them.
right, and you look at something like cannabis and, like, really, like, the biggest negative side effect is that you might get too high and, like, be uncomfortable for a few hours, right? But, like,
Yeah.
otherwise,
Right.
and I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's the only, like, there's more, but that's probably, like, the biggest concern that could happen is that, like, you're uncomfortable for a few hours, and yes, that can, like, suck too, right? But I
Right.
really love that, like, you're talking about this openly because, like I said, so many people rely on cannabis and have credited cannabis as being a coping mechanism to help them temporarily or consistently in their healing journey, but they're too afraid to talk about it. So thank you for giving all of those parents and whistleblowers and survivors a voice by sharing your story.
Well, I hope it's helpful, because I know for me, it was a stigma for me for a while, and I don't want other people to feel the same way. So if they're in a situation, even if you're facing, legal issues from it, I'm telling you, there's always a way. There's always a way around it. I could have been in big trouble for what I did, I'm not saying nobody ever does. Yes, things can happen, but I'm just saying, I think that it's important to keep your mind focused on the positive side of it. Don't delve into, and don't let yourself fall into a place where, you're looking at the negative part of it, because mindset is huge. And you've had a lot of guests on who have talked about this, and I 100% agree that my mindset, the things I say to myself, the things I think, all of it matters. Like, it all matters. And if I'm not doing my best to, try to um, do what I can, not only for myself, but for those around me, my immediate family who I'm responsible for. But then the wider field out here of people, because I love people. My thing has always been that I want to try to help people. And so if I can do anything to try to encourage people, or um, you know, just, give them a little push and say, "Hey, I know this is hard for you. It's hard for me too. Let's stick together and do this. Let's, stick up for one another. Let's encourage one another, because sometimes that means more to people than we even can imagine. Like, I know it means a lot to me, so I know it means a lot to other people too. So that's what I'm here to do, is to say, "Hey, I'm just a mess like everybody else. I have my issues. I don't have it all together. But you know what? Like, we can learn in this life to learn how to make some better choices, and to walk with one another, and to be a light to and with one another." And I think that that just goes further than sometimes I even have the vision to see. It can be just, it can be life changing to people. So thank you for everybody who does that in my life. Thank you for, your chat, your community, because it has been so amazing. I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to say, like I said to you, my overarching theme is yes, I have all these things that I've been through. I've even been through, we haven't even brought up the tornado yet. Me and my family experienced an EF4 tornado that came almost directly over our apartment at the time. And that's another whole big, drama and trauma in and of itself. But I think because of everything I had been through, I think that that's a lot of what happened to our city. Yeah, it was completely devastating. And I'm not from this area, so like I don't have the connections here, to know a lot. But I mean, we were brought here for a purpose and we live here and it is our city now. So we're here now.
Talk about this event. When did it happen? And talk about what you guys went through living here.
Okay, so this was the one that happened December 10th, 2.5 years ago. And it was like a big news story because it affected a lot of different cities. Our city, which I don't mind telling people, it's Mayfield, Kentucky, and it was very hard hit. It was in the news, and it was a big thing. So it was really hard because, like I said, it came right over us. So we have all the immediate things to deal with, which we didn't know how bad it was. We didn't know that it had come right over us at the time. We thought that it had skirted like by us. But of course, in the morning, we saw everything and it was very apparent because you could see enough of the path to see, what it had done. And it was just, short term and long term. Short term, we had, no electricity, no gas, we had damage to our car, damage to our apartment, major damage to the building that we lived in. Thankfully, we were able to stay there, and we actually lived there up until just almost 2 weeks ago when we moved into our home. Which this is a blessing that has come out of it. We would never have been able to, without me working, been able to afford to move into our own home, move out of an apartment into an actual home. But because of this situation, there were charities and organizations that popped up specifically to help people. And we got into one of those organizations because our neighbors that used to live across the hall from us told us about it. So we live not too far from them now. They're in their own home. And yeah, so it's just there's long-term things going on. Like there's rebuilding that has happened here, some of it, but there is still so much that needs to be rebuilt. I mean, it's obviously never going to look the same. It has been just as bad as what it looks like. I mean, yeah. So,
This is so horrific. And if you're listening, say on Spotify or iTunes, I encourage you to just click on the YouTube to sort of bookmark where you're at right now on Spotify. Go check out YouTube and scroll to the same place that you're at now and just look through these photos that I have. It is upsetting how devastated this community was. I mean, there's really like nothing standing except, a couple things. It's just like totally demolished, and I can't imagine living through something like that, and how traumatizing that must have been, especially when, this is like your home. Like this isn't, you don't have an opportunity to like run when something like this happens or like to really like understand the brevity of damage that something like this can do and like to just think about like how quickly your life could have just been taken away, and what a freaking miracle that you guys were pretty much like unscathed from it and we're in like, I mean, it looks like one of the few little pockets that, didn't get completely demolished from this thing.
right, there was the complex that we used to live in, the apartment complex had 10 buildings, and one of them was completely destroyed. The people that were on the bottom floor that survived it were in their bathtub, and that was the only thing left of like any safe space. Other than that, every building was damaged, but no building was that severely damaged. That was the only one that was like completely demolished. So I'm so with you because there was so much destruction right around us. Our whole building could have been just like that one. And, who knows what would have happened to us if that would have happened. We were huddled in our bathroom because that was the safest place. It was a tiny apartment and it had no windows in there. And, we were ready to get in the bathtub if we had to. It all happened so fast. It was amazing. It was just the craziest, loudest sounding thing I have ever experienced, and our ears popped because of that, the air pressure changing, the compression, and it was horrible sounding. It sounded just like, how people say it sounds like a freight train or something. I can't even describe to you how much louder it is than that, because it was a massive, it kept going between like a quarter mile to a half mile wide. And like I said, it was an EF4, so it was a very large tornado. And yeah, it was terrible. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
What a freaking miracle that you lived through this, and it's really scary to think about the trauma that weather can cause, and these really destructive events that just, wipe out, destroy, or, negatively impact our communities that we live in. And I'm so grateful that you and your family were able to not only have a home after that, but to be able to have the blessing that you have now of, this kind of led to you guys finding sort of your dream home, because you were sort of pressured to look for another place potentially to live. And I love that you guys again had a happy ending come out of something so dark.
Yes, yes, a blessing from something that could have been so harmful and hurtful, and we could have fallen to pieces because of it. And I did have a hard time for a while, and I'm so thankful that even though I struggled with it for a while, that we're coming out on the other side, and now we're out of the place where it actually happened. And our home, it's just so bright and cheery, and it really is. It's a new beginning. You're talking to me at a place where we're in another new beginning. And um I never imagined that something like that would come out of it, because for a while it just seemed so like, oh my gosh, we're stuck here. We're in the same place that it happened, because I we were still living in the same apartment that it had happened in. And it was more traumatic than I realized and that I could even comprehend, and probably to this day. I mean, it really was. It was hard. So because all around you, you look, you see the trees that are all messed up. Like, even though the buildings are all fixed right around where I was, you see scars of it everywhere. You can't avoid it. So
Just
yeah, so our community is coming along, and there's a lot of rebuilding going on. And I'm kind of excited to see, because we're not from this area. We're in Kentucky, and I grew up in California. My husband was from Florida and Georgia, so neither one of us is from this area. So I'm excited to see where this keeps going, because we're obviously here for a reason, and I have no idea really what it is, to be honest, but we've met some awesome people. The response that happened right after the tornado was amazing. We were constantly taken care of. We had the most amazing people come into our community and offer not only food, but all kinds of necessities and just anything that you could imagine. And we've always been taken care of. We weren't just like sitting there with nothing to do. We had help. We had a decent apartment situation and owners where they helped us too. And um it's been another learning experience, another thing to put under my belt and be like, hey, I've been through other traumas. Here's another. Now I've experienced the natural disaster type one. So it all teaches you and molds you into who you are. And it, as much as I would want to say I never want to go through it again, at least now I have that experience and I know more of what it is, and I can be a little bit more prepared now for just life in general. So
And some of these like interesting things that have happened to you, other people have gone through, and it's really not talked about a lot. And so I think it's really good that we're bringing attention to these other types of things that you can survive, be impacted by, and have to heal from, such as, a weather event, such as medical abuse, having your child taken from you. And there's a couple things that I want to go back and talk about in your story a little bit deeper. that we
Sure.
talked about earlier. The first being, I want to go back to the night that you started having those interesting, kind of scary and impactful reactions from whether it was the medication or whatever it was where you were saying things that you felt sort of were out of your control. Can you share a little bit more about that and the things that you were saying or how you felt? I've had other guests on the show have similar instances where it was, it sort of felt like something, whether it was spiritual or otherwise, maybe under the influence of a medication. And I think that's not talked about enough either, how we can sort of be attacked in our own body and overcome, even if we're conscious of it. And I'd love for you to maybe shine a light on your experience a little bit more with that, because I think some people will be able to relate.
Definitely. I part of the thing that I had kind of left out, what was going on in my personal, what I call kind of eye-opening, awakening thing is having been raised a Christian, I kind of knew that there was a lot of that there were things missing. I had questions when I was younger. I would ask questions and I would see, just quite frankly, the hypocrisy that was going on around me, whether it was in my church, in my family life, whatever it was. There were things that were not adding up. And I was coming into this whole thing that um, because I know that you have some similar beliefs too, that we literally have been lied to like about so many things, like everything. They try to do it to everything. And so what they've done is they've left out whole chunks of what the Bible actually says. You know, I didn't know what the word Torah really was. I had heard it before, but I didn't know it was just the way and the law of our maker, our creator. Like I didn't even know that. And how crazy is it that you're, supposedly raised in a religion where then you're this whole big chunk of it is changed and left out and turned into something else. And so I was coming into a different knowledge than what my parents had. And so that was a lot of where our struggles were, because they saw me going like a different route and like learning. There's all kinds of different names for it. We don't really call ourselves anything. I just say that I just follow our creator and I try to follow his way, and it's literally that simple. Whatever I can do to try to do that, that's my life. So I say I'm a follower of the way. You can call me a Christian, you can call me, a Hebrew roots person, whatever label you want. I'm not really big into labels. I just try to do what I, find is the best thing, and that's what I'm trying to do. Now, do I have it all figured out? Definitely not. I'm learning every day. But that's one of the major things that started happening between me and my parents, because we were going then on two different paths basically, and they were seeing this rocky time in my life. And then, like you were saying earlier, instead of being supportive and being like, hey, we see that, you're going a different direction, but we can tell you're getting better. Like, you're doing better. And, thank you for sharing stuff, whatever, there were some positive interactions, but I have to tell you, more so than not, it was pretty negative and really, really hard to deal with. And I was not getting support. I was feeling like everything I was doing and wanting to do and believing in was just completely against them. And it was so hard because
And
I
they
love
were,
my
at this time,
parents.
they were like very stout Christian, where it was like very
Um,
black and white, or what was their beliefs?
well, I mean, my parents hadn't really been going to church regularly. And like I
Oh,
said, I'm not here to try to, trash my parents, because I more so than anything don't want to. But their life was more like, oh, we're Christians, and they weren't necessarily like fully, doing much about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was more like, it was, to me, to be quite honest, it was almost like Christian in name, but we're not really like going by everything we say we believe. I mean, that's just to be honest.
yeah.
And so they had started going back to church again because we had moved to Texas. Like I think I had mentioned, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It was California was where I was raised, and then we moved to Texas to be by my dad's sister, so my aunt and uncle out there, because he hadn't, had much of a relationship with her for years because they had been separated by so much distance. And then because of the the cost of living in California, my parents were like, hey, this is a good choice for us. So that's how we ended up in Texas. So, yeah, they started going to, I guess it was their, I'm not even sure. I guess it was their church because I kind of just didn't get into all their business about that. But yeah, they they tried to do things like when I started having issues with my parents, they were like, "Well, we want to bring our pastor over and talk to you and all this stuff." And I'm thinking, "Hell no, I'm not going to talk to your pastor." Like you can see I'm going a different direction. I am not going to, like I was once again trying to be controlled, trying to be, and I think they did have good intentions, but I think it just got out of control to the point where there becomes a point where you're like, as a parent and your adult child, like, making suggestions or saying, "Oh, I'm concerned about this," or whatever. But they were like trying to force me to do things. And that was really unfortunate, telling me that they're going to bring their pastor over and like make me talk to him. I was thinking, no way, I am not going to talk to your Baptist pastor. I'm like, no, like this is the stuff that I've gotten away from. I'm thinking, no, there's no way. And so, it's really unfortunate because things are still very unresolved. However, I did cut off communication with my parents on and off because of everything that has gone on because it had to be done. You have to set healthy boundaries. But I'm sort of back in communication sort of on a regular basis with my mom. It's not anything great, but I have tried to bring up what has happened and they have never wanted to talk about it. So it might be a thing where we never get to talk about it. I really don't know. They just don't have the capacity to deal with it. And so I'm trying to be, like the peacekeeper, like in the middle, like understanding of it. But it is really hard for me. Like there are so many things that we need to discuss. And when things are left undone and unsaid, it's hard, you know? So
Absolutely. And so around
yeah.
that time, so they were sort of on a different path than you spiritually when you were going through this kind of spiritual attack that happened to you in your own home.
Yep. And then it became like us against each other, like us pitted against each other, and it just turned into a horrible thing. And you know, it's ended up being a good thing for me in the sense that I needed to get away from them and I needed to get away from that. But I didn't want it to happen that way. I didn't want there to be the conflict and the controversy going on. That's not what I had intended. But sometimes when you're trying to pull away from something that's had a hold on you for a long time, these things happen. I mean, you've heard how many stories now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It happens. So I guess it had to happen in order for me to maybe fully see um, where they were too. Like maybe it was good for me to see and not to think, oh, they're going to be supportive and understanding. I guess I'd rather know the truth than be thinking that things, could kind of be okay between us. At least I kind of know where we stand. It's just hard. So,
Totally. Oh my gosh, who wants to be at odds with their own family, especially when, you have these beautiful children that I'm sure you would love to have this cohesive, family with and be able to do things that normal families do and get together for holidays and stuff. And that's got to be really
yes.
hard for you and, your husband and your daughter that you guys are, it's like fractured sort of, you get to enjoy some of that. Like I love that you have this life and, you found love, but I'm sure that that gets really hard and sad certain times of year, especially just to know that, you are so misunderstood by your family.
Yeah, it does. It does. It gets heavy, it gets difficult. And, just like anything, I keep trying to take it moment by moment, sometimes day by day, and just, keep going forward with it because I never thought that I'd have such a rift between me and my parents because especially my mom has been very supportive through the years of my health and helping me out. And that's where I went to live when I had to physically leave my first husband. And they've always been supportive. And so then all of a sudden, when they weren't, and when they literally, thought that the thing to do was to take my child from me, it was shocking. It was shocking. So
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. And so going back to that one night, what were some of the things that you said? And did your parents feel the house rumbling? I know that you had said your child did, your daughter had felt and seen the same thing that you did, where it was almost like that earthquake. Did your parents experience that too? Or was that totally, it wasn't like you guys were experiencing this event and they were in like a different realm?
I wonder because, Emma, I still don't know. I have wanted to talk to them, but because communication and honesty is so cut off to some degree, I've never gotten into that with them still. Like I said, I was surprised when my daughter told me because I thought I was in my like own, happenings, and I didn't think that they knew. And so I think that they had to be somewhat aware, but honestly, I don't know. I don't know what they're aware of. I first started running around saying things. I still don't know quite what this means, but I said heaven is here. There was something going on that made me feel like very connected to the spiritual, the unseen realm. And I was like, I can't quite put it into words, but I was feeling something and experiencing something on a massive level that I hadn't before. And I really think it was my push to try to get away from the systems that had been trying to, keep me connected, the allopathic care, you know, the the Christian church that likes to hide things. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like because I was completely coming out of that stuff, it was like a final push like I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I felt like I was going in and out of possible possession. I'm really not sure because there are big chunks of time where I do not have any idea what happened. I don't know what I said. I don't know what I did. I have no idea. So I think there's a good chance that I was, like I said, being spiritually not just oppressed, but like something physically coming in and out of me. And because that was like a huge, turning point. After that I was like this is all so like I have seen things that I didn't before. And um you know I just can't quite put it into words. It's a lot of it's just like feelings, like things that I just sensed around me. And yeah, and I can see things on people's faces sometimes and in their eyes. Like that's been my gift since I was really young. I can sense, like, I don't necessarily say it to the person or to anybody around me, but I'll get a sense of like if there's something evil oppressing them, if there's, an unclean spirit oppressing them or in them. I can see a lot of that stuff, but I don't necessarily see it on the outside of their body. It's more like I can see it on their face and I can like feel it. So that was very real that night. That was like hugely magnified and big. Yeah.
Wow, that's it. I mean, I think that it's more common than what we want to believe that there, really, I mean, well, we know that there's a spiritual war, but that it does oppress and like you said, possess us. And we're so disconnected from that realm so many times that like we justify or explain it away a different way, instead of looking at it like, gosh, I was like in a higher frequency or a higher state or like even lower, I was in like a low
Yes.
frequency and like
Yes.
something overcame me,
Mhm.
and we like explain these things away with like clinical terms. And sometimes I really do think that there's these spiritual things that happen to us that can't be explained. Like, for example, as I've talked to you, you probably see me, I've gotten out of my seat a couple times. It just happened again. You can see the reflection in my glasses, but there's a light in my room right now and it's turned on 4 times already and I've had to get up and turn it off. And it's like right in
Okay,
front
that
of me.
that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, that kind of stuff just ever since I was 14 and had that whole thing happen, girl, it just weird stuff happens everywhere I go. So it doesn't
Literally, it's
surprise
the 4
me.
times, come on, you can see the little, like, light in my
Yes.
glasses, but I'm like,
Yeah.
"Why?" This light is like if the same light has come on 4 times since I've talked to you, which is
It's
crazy.
not a surprise though. I mean, people have told me so many things and they'll like see things about me because that's like one other thing that I was going to bring up because I've mentioned it in chat before and I still don't know what it means. But when I was still in Texas and all this stuff was going on, I would go out driving to get away from stuff and I would usually do it at night and I loved it. I would go out driving and I would go really far away and I wouldn't use GPS and I would just go. And it was my freedom. And I would listen to songs and I would sing. I stopped by this one place, and it was actually during the day. I stopped by this one place. It was a gas station slash like a little like not even a diner, like really tiny. And it was like one of those kind of very eclectic different places of different people. And the gentleman who was running the food part of it, he was obviously like some kind of like a seer or something, okay? And I could feel it like going in there. I could feel it because I can feel all this stuff. And he starts saying to me, it was like kind of embarrassing. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? He's like, your aura is the whitest aura I've ever seen. And he's like, there's basically no holes in it. And I'm like, I'm like, I'm kind of looking at him like I have no clue what he's saying to me. You know what I mean? Like I just don't understand. And I kind of say that to him, and he's like, that's okay. He's like, I'm just telling you that, like I meant to tell you this, and you're gonna like it's okay, just so you know. And I'm like, okay. And then he gave me like some other advice, and he was really cool. And there, like I said, there was a bunch of other kind of, different people around and stuff. But that was a really interesting thing that happened because, like I said, at the time, I didn't even know, like, I just like packed it away and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then when I started learning more about that later, even though I had heard about, people's auras, and there's technology where you can see it and some people can see it more than others, because I really can't. I'm kind of jealous. I want to see people's auras and I can't. Um, and then when I learned about what it is, I'm like, well, that's really fascinating. And I don't know, it's just, so there's that. That happened at that time too.
Oh my goodness. I want to dive a little bit more into your faith and talk about your walk with God. That's been a huge part of your story. We've heard multiple times where God was really what you leaned on to get through stuff. And even if you weren't intending to, he seemed to be there for you even when you weren't leaning on him and intervening in these really beautiful ways in your life, even when it seemed like very dark times. How did you maintain such a strong relationship with God despite having trauma after trauma and just these horrible things happening, sometimes all at the same time? And since you were young, going through such a horrible, medical condition in your freshman year, like what is your walk with God been? Have you struggled to keep that at any point? Has that been something that's been really strong? I'd love to hear your walk with God and sort of how that's grown and evolved throughout the years for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, my faith has always been there. Even when I've walked away and had my moments where I'm definitely not doing the things that I know I should or that I did before, I have definitely gone on the roller coaster of it. But I can say one thing, I have always had faith. I don't I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's just, from, epigenetics, because those are huge. That's huge. Things are written into our DNA from our ancestors, and it's with us. It's with us somehow. It'll come out somehow. And so I don't know. I've just always known that no matter what happens, like I'm going to be okay. Like whatever happens in this life cannot do anything to my soul, to my spirit, to who we really are. Like this is a flesh suit that I'm in, and it's a part of me right now, but it is not all of me. Like the eternal part of me is so different. The eternal part of you, we can see some of it, but there's an eternal part of you that nothing that happens here can do anything about. And that's my favorite verses actually say that, which is Romans 8:38 and 39. Those have been my favorite verses for about at least over 30 years. And I just lean into that, where it says nothing is going to separate us from the love of our creator, which is in his son, Yahusha, our redeemer. And I've always stood on that, and I've always been like, okay, no matter what happens, I'm going to stand on this. Like it's going to be okay. Even when it doesn't feel okay and you don't see a way, somehow, somewhere, even when I do pass away, I know that it was my time. I know I'm just moving on to the next, part of it. And it is going to be okay. So I guess in a way, I have always had that faith. I can't sit here and say that I've always been like, doing walking out the faith. Like there are times where I felt like I've just begged him to take me. I'm like, okay, this is too much. I want to go, with you. I don't want to be here going through this. I have had times like that where I felt just so done. But it is, my faith has been everything, and it's evolved through the years. Like I said, I talked to you about learning more about the way of our creator, and still learning more about it. There's always something to learn. We're in this body, we're never going to arrive anywhere. We're not completed. So, to me, I'm honestly looking forward to my resurrected perfect body. Like that's where I think I'm going one day. That's where I'm going with this. And I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know how it all works, but that's where my faith is. And I'm along the way just trying to do my best to make the best choices I can, to be as obedient as I can, even though I fail all the time. And so, yeah, so my faith is, it's everything. Like, I can't imagine turning away from our creator and saying, I'm just going to do it myself. Bye. Like, I can't even imagine trying to survive without him. Like, I depend on him for everything. So yeah, so it is my life and my breath.
That's so beautiful. And you really are a living example of his word. Like I said in the intro, I can't personally thank you enough for the energy, the frequency, the encouragement, the kindness, the compassion, the empathy, the love that you bring to this community, and you have your own story that you're harboring. And like I said, I would have never known, because you're just this bright beam of light, and you are always an advocate for everybody else first. You completely make it about other people when you have an important piece of the puzzle too, and not that I'm commending you for not talking about your story, because it's amazing to have you talk about it, but I notice your selflessness and how you put other people first, and how you really do embody that walk, and you try to be accepting and non-judgmental of people even when their beliefs conflict yours. That's one of the things that I love the most about you. There's all walks of life that, even on this podcast, are that come up. There's people that have a strong faith that they're committed to. There's people that sort of walk a line between being faithful to something and sort of not. And then there's people who don't believe, and all and everything in between. And there's some people that are really stuck on, like, promoting their belief and, like, not being able to look outside of that box, because it's, for whatever reason, they're so close-minded that they can't sort of, like, be accepting that there's people out there that aren't like them. And one of
Right,
the things that I
right.
really love about you is that you do have such a strong rooting and such a strong commitment to your faith and to God and to your beliefs, but that doesn't stop you from embracing everybody and loving them and loving on them, and really encouraging other people to do the same, and you really bring that, I'm sure, everywhere in your life, but just on a little micro scale, like, you really bring it in this community, and you've helped really smooth over a lot of those conversations that happen in the chat where people will be like, that's not Christian, or, whatever it is that people have a problem with. You are so good with, like, looking at it from a critical eye and being like, yeah, but that shouldn't stop us from loving this person, like, they still matter, and we should love them no matter what their belief is, and pray for them that, like, if we want them to get somewhere, or if we want them to have a walk the same that we do, that we pray, that we don't, condemn them for it, and I really love that you embody that, because you really are. You're just like this strong, this bright light, and I would have never ever guessed that you have been through so many traumatic things in your life.
Thank you, Emma. I needed to hear that, and I really appreciate that, because for me, it is therapy being around all of you. I love being in a community where we can support one another, and, like you said, just be kind and loving, knowing that we have our differences, and that's okay. Because I've always been the person that I'm like, that's okay. Like, I want to hear people's stories. I want to hear their backgrounds. I want to know about them. And um, I appreciate that you are able to not only see that but express that, because I think that sometimes we don't hear enough from people, what they see about us. And because I don't want to be lifted up myself, because if you have anything good to say about me, I'm giving it all back to God and saying it's him, it's his strength. And I have no problem saying that, because that's always been is my view, and that's always going to be my view, is it's him, it's his strength, and I am leaning on him, and he is my strength. If you see the strength, hallelujah, because it's him. So and not that he hasn't given us gifts, and not that we shouldn't be thankful for that. We can, but I just want to give all praise to him, because he made me, he made you, he made everything. Why wouldn't I want to be like so thankful? Like, I think it's amazing. As difficult as things are sometimes, this life is also so beautiful. And I think that, if this was the only life I had, that would be okay too. But for me, because I am counting on having something more, like that's my real kingdom. My kingdom mindset is in heaven, is in where there's going to be no tears and no death and nothing bad ever again. And I so look forward to that, because this life is hard. This life is hard, it is. I don't really know anyone who's ever said any different either. So yeah, so if I can be an encouragement even to one person, if I can, be a help or a light to even one person, then I think I've done what I meant to do. And so thank you, God.
Thank you, God. Absolutely. And amen to that. And speaking of, having hardships, one of the things that I wanted to talk about also, which I think is really cool, I haven't really got to talk about this on my podcast, is that you do homeschooling, and that was a route that you chose. And I think that that is looked at as um, not so much anymore, but people still sort of look at that as being kind of strange. But then there's also a lot of people who are wanting to do it, but are intimidated by it. I wanted to hear your journey with homeschooling, how you overcame challenges, and to maybe, if there's any encouragement that you can give or ways to make it that you found to make it easier on yourself to do that. I love to share that with people because I'm sure there's a lot of conflicted parents out there like you who maybe haven't taken that step but are researching it.
Well, I am still in the new stages of it, because our daughter is almost 6.
Oh,
So up until now, we haven't done anything formal with her. We've done what I would call more of unschooling, because there's different, like, people have different um, homeschooling methods that they do. And so far we haven't done anything formal with her. So we will start doing more formal things, but like, to me, her training so far is um just learning by being around us. We're her examples, and me and her dad, my husband. And I don't have a curriculum yet, but I will eventually get one. But I wouldn't even be like so hard set that I had to have one. You know what I'm saying? I am like that open to it, where I'm like, this doesn't have to be formal in any sense. Some people like school and like it to be formal, and I think that's awesome, because I actually enjoyed a lot of my schooling, and I did well, and that's fine. But I think to put the education in the hands of people who actually have a good intention, because you and I both, I think, have the same view of the basic public school system, or any school system. A lot of it is not for people. It really isn't. It is not for people. They are not giving the truth to a lot of the degree. They're giving a narrative that they've constructed, and a lot of it is just downright false. And so for me, it was an easy decision, because my husband had the same views I did, and we both wanted to raise, even before we had our daughter, which, I mean, it actually happened like really fast. But even before we really talked about stuff, we had the ideas of, we want to do this our way, meaning like have as much control as possible. I don't want to give away my control to other people, because when you're sending your child to school, you're just leaving their education. Yeah, there's my husband and our daughter. You're leaving their education in somebody else's hands, and I would rather have as much control over that as possible, to lead her in the way that we're supposed to, given by our creator. So I am still so new to it that I don't know where it's going to lead, and we still don't know the exact curriculum that we're going to do. But I'm excited, and I'm excited to see where it keeps leading me because, my health issues have been difficult, but I've been getting a lot of relief and then I've been doing a lot better lately. And so I'm really excited to see where it leads me, having to kind of be pushed with doing more with her, formally, because so far it's been fun. And now it'll get more into, actual like school and teaching. So I don't know where it's gonna go. I'm just gonna take it like I do everything else, one step at a time, and I'll just see where it goes and, where she excels and that kind of thing. And I'm hoping to get connected to others to do either like a co-op situation where she gets together with other homeschoolers. I'm really hoping to do that because there's a lot of people actually around here. Like you were saying, people are doing it so much more now. It's not like the weird, oh, you're the weird homeschool, it's not weird anymore. It's actually becoming more mainstream, which is really cool. People shouldn't feel bad about doing it. If you feel like it's the thing to do for you, I say go for it because that's what we're doing. And it can't work for everybody, and that's understandable too. But yeah, like don't be afraid. Like you shouldn't feel like you're ill equipped or, just because you're not a formally trained teacher, you're not capable. Yahuwah, our creator, made us to be our children's teachers. So yeah, so it'll be exciting. I'm excited to see where it goes.
And I love that you said that about a co-op too, because I think if more parents did talk to each other and discussed it, you don't have to do it alone either if you're able to find sort of a tribe. There used to be like, a long time ago, it used to be like that's why they say it takes a village to raise a child, because that's what it would be. Like people would come together
Yes.
and share responsibilities of like raising the children in the village, where now it's like, oh, we're just so separated. Like, sorry, mom, you got to do it all yourself. You got to figure it out. Like you don't get any help unless you happen to have family that lives by that can help pick up the slack a little bit. Or like you said, you trust the government to do it for you, or you take them to daycare, get nannies. Where I think it's a really cool idea to see what other interest there is in your area. Are there other parents who want to do it and maybe you want to share the responsibility so it's not just all on one parent to do? Like, can people step up just like how it is in school? Like one parent teaches one subject and then doesn't have to, do it the whole week. And then another parent can step in and do this or home ec or whatever it is. And I think that's really cool that you're exploring that. And I really hope that, what you're doing in your community does help open up doors for these things to happen. And who knows, like maybe it'll inspire all these little co-ops, whether in your area or otherwise, that you can help, you can help educate people on how to do and sort of create like a blueprint and help people not be so afraid to step into that.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yes. I don't know about all that. I mean, you're talking about like, me leading the way for something. I'm not sure. I'm kind of like more like along for the, but you never know. I mean, yeah, if there isn't a lot of that in our area here yet, because I still don't know. Yeah, maybe it will become, my thing. We'll see. It's exciting.
It's
It's
really
weird
exciting.
being, 48 and a half and having a, she's almost 6. It's funny, but what a blessing though that I didn't think I was going to be able to have any. I had always wanted to have like between like 4 to 7 children. So even though I was never able to have that many, I still have 2 blessings, and I'm so excited to be doing things what I consider a lot a lot more educated in what's better for my child now. And I yeah, it is it's just redemption. It just feels so good.
100% girl. And that leads me to my next question, which would be, where does it sort of stand right now with your other daughter? Are there things that people can do to support you? And what was your inspiration for wanting to speak out about this?
Well, in general, I just think that honesty is so important. And I think that if I can help others to see that talking about the difficult hurts and just letting it out there, if I can help others to see that that is really freeing and therapeutic and really good for you, then I really hope that that's what happens from this. And I just wanted to be honest and just say, hey, I have situations that I'm not proud of. I don't like the fact that I don't have a relationship with my older daughter, this is hard for me. I don't know what to do. I would love it if people would pray for us and just, she's never met her, younger sister. And her, that they want to know each other. I know my daughter does. She talks about her and she wants to know her. And as she, gets older, she'll want to know her even more. So if we can have some kind of reconciliation, I'd like it sooner than later. But I mean, all in the time of, our creator and what's meant to happen. I mean, we'll see. I've tried to not be pushy in that area, and I feel like I have failed in some way. Like I have kind of sat back, and because I've had so much going on with myself, it has been difficult, but I've had to give myself grace too, and I've had to learn that, hey, I'm just trying to do my best, like literally to live too. And sometimes things happen that we can look back on and say, hey, I'm not proud of this. I would do this probably different. I've learned from this. Let me like tell this to somebody else so that they can be like, okay, that's helpful to hear because I've either been through it or I'm going through it and I needed to hear that too. So I encourage all you parents who are going through similar things, like please try not to beat yourself up. Please try not to be negative and try to just, go forward as best you can, even though it's so hard. It sometimes it just is what it is for a while and you just look into the future and just say, I really hope this is going to be better and I'm going to trust I'm going to trust God, I'm going to trust my creator, and I just have to leave it alone sometimes. So that was really my inspiration is I just want to be honest. I just want to show, hey, this is where I'm at and this is where I've been and maybe I can connect with some of you, because of it. And that's awesome. So,
I love that you decided to speak up. I remember when you had first sort of started dropping just little hints that you had a story in the chat, and then we're kind of like, yeah, maybe one day I'll tell my story. I love that you just went for it, and that you're here now. Like you were on the other side being inspired by these stories. You ended up being and you play such a critical role in this community, and now you're deciding to put your puzzle piece into the puzzle, and just seeing the full circle of it is really freaking cool, and I just want to say how proud I am of you.
you.
This is your first time speaking out about this, and I would have never guessed. You're just like I expected, brilliant, eloquent, and you have an absolutely incredible story and amazing things that you have overcome and survived. And I just want to thank you for the courage that you have to speak out.
Thank you, Emma. The other thing I wanted to also encourage people with is we need to stop comparing ourselves to one another because I I thought for a while that I didn't really have much to say. I thought, well, people aren't going to want to listen to this story. It's not grand. I haven't been through like some, big long-term thing that you can be like, "Oh yeah, like these people were specifically oppressing you or harming you or this or that." But you know what? We've all been through something. We're all going through something. We all have a story. And you know what? They're all important. Each piece together is important. And so that's my main thing is I just want to keep encouraging people. Try to step out there. As hard as it is, get in chat, say hi for your first time, start saying, hey, one little piece of, who you are. It's really hard for you to say, but you started, you did it, and you got it out there. And it's so healing just to say, hey, this is part of what's happened. This is my life. This is difficult and whatever it is. So yeah, that's where my heart is because I've always been that type of person. I have people come up to me who start telling me all kinds of stuff. Oh, I feel so comfortable around you because I'm very talkative and just very open and I'm just who I am. I'm just, just me. Like I don't really hide things very well. I'm just who I am. So um I figure, okay, well, if I can take that into this situation and just use it in any way to encourage people and just say, hey, be who you are, be who you were meant to be, and just go with it. Don't compare yourself to, this person's big story, this person's whatever, because we're all important and it's not good to compare and feel like, oh, well, I don't matter because I don't have, this big of a voice or I whatever. Your voice, if your voice shakes the whole time you're talking, still tell your story to somebody eventually. Like, it's important to start. So Yeah.
Amen, sister. I love that so much. Yeah, and I completely agree with you. That's been like the biggest thing that I shouldn't say the biggest thing. There's so many just big amazing things that I've taken from this podcast, but just recognizing like the humanity in everybody and acknowledging that and honoring that like exactly what you said, there is no comparison. Like being a human is hard. And the more that we can talk about that, the easier it gets in a really ironic way. You know, the things that are like the most shameful to talk about and like the things that could be the most embarrassing or most damning or scary to talk about are actually the things that help other people. They're the things that help us. They're the biggest influences in our life. Like we learn so much more going through the hardest of times than we do accomplishing like the biggest successes. You know, the successes feel
Yes.
good because of all the things that led up to it that were really hard. You know, if we just succeeded at everything and everything went perfect, we wouldn't appreciate it. You know, it's the hard things that really help mold us into who we are and give us that chance to make a decision of like, do I let this drag me down or do I overcome it? You know, and I just
Yeah.
love these stories of people that like you that just are so adamant and relentless with I'm going to overcome whatever's in my path no matter what, you know, and like you do. And it's inspiring because a lot of people need that. Like that's what gets them through is knowing that they're not alone no matter what. And sometimes like the most simple stories of, you know, abuse or hardship of things that people would be like, well, that doesn't matter. It was just this one little thing. Well, guess what? Like sometimes the littlest things are what most people experience. And everybody's invalidated because they're like you said, they're comparing instead of being like, this was hard. Like it might not be what this person went through, but like it was really hard for me. And it's good to talk about all levels of trauma and all different traumas because there's always going to be somebody on the other end who can relate, no matter if it's, you know, this really crazy event or if it's something that happened one time that scarred somebody. You know, when we talk about it, it heals. Like it's so ironic. It's like the things that we're taught to not talk about and to like harbor are actually the things that like we need to talk about. And instead, like we're all like having these really shallow surface level conversations that are very unfulfilling and make us feel bad because we're like, gosh, like I'm suffering inside, but nobody else seems to be. And it's like, no, they are. We're wearing our masks, you know, and like this
Yes, people
is
are afraid to be honest because it is a level of, some people feel like it's making them look weak, and then some people they just struggle with that part because they want to be so perfect, they have an image, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm all about, you know what, you have to learn how to drop that eventually and just be who you are because, you know, why would you try to pretend to be somebody else? Like it's so unfulfilling. At least to me it is.
exhausting, you know?
Yes,
Oh
yes,
my gosh. Is there
yes.
anything else from your story that we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I just wanted to hit on the major things as much as I could and just, you know, put it out there like you said, just let it all out and no, that's it. That's it.
Where can people connect with you, online or elsewhere?
You can find me. I'm most active on my Facebook, which is well, you and I are actually Facebook friends. It's the Catherine Noel Peterson. People are welcome to look me up there. I am on X on Twitter, but I don't really get on too much. So, I mean, people could, look me up there too. But yeah, kind of on and off. Sometimes I won't even look for like almost a whole week. So don't don't count on me to be on there. It's just for some reason not my thing. Um, and I'm not even necessarily that active on Facebook all the time either. It just, kind of ebbs and flows that way too. But that's a good place to, if people, and then same thing with YouTube, in your community, in comments, in chat, that's obviously where I'm super active right now and really enjoying it and have no plans to go anywhere. So,
Gosh, you are just amazing. And again, I want to personally thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the support that you give to me, to every guest, to the eloquence that you display publicly, whether it's in the chat, in the comments, like it blows me away in like the best way. Like it makes me really emotional, like how supportive you've been, you know, and like This is a really special episode for me to have you on because you've made such an impact in my life and in so many other people's. Like, you don't even realize it, but you really are a shining light, and like this whole community loves you. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
Oh, thank you so much, Emma. I so feel the same way. It is mutual. I am right there with you, and I am so happy to be in your life. Thank you so much. Your community, I know you know to some degree how much you're touching people, but you really are putting together a place, a space, and a place where people can feel like, hey, I'm just going to be myself, or whatever it is. I'm gonna at least hang in the background and listen to this, whatever it is. People feel accepted, and that this is a good thing for them. And as difficult as it is, because there's a lot of really rough stuff going on here, somehow it's put together in a way that can be nurturing with to people. And I think that's so important, because I think that sometimes these kind of things aren't dealt with in a very healthy way. And I think that this is one of the more healthy ways that I've seen this dealt with. And that's what I appreciate. That's what I saw in you right away. I'm like, man, this girl, she's just sitting there listening to the most difficult things that people are saying. And she looks just so into it. She just is, looking so loving and kind. And I thought that was amazing. Like, I was immediately connected to you. And so this is just so mutual for me. And I love you. I love your community. I'm so happy to be here, and I can't wait to see where this keeps going, because we need one another, and we need to expose these horrible, dark things and try to eliminate as much of this as we can, because we're responsible. Once we know what's going on, we can't just turn around and walk the other way and be like, whatever. Like, we are responsible for wherever we're at, whatever we can do. We need to do the work that we can, whatever we're called to, whatever our gifts are, whatever we can do. We have to do something. We can't just sit by and do nothing. That's why we're in the state that we are, is because so many people are either doing nothing, or we have the terrible people who are doing all the atrocities. And it's just, this can, how many thousands of years has this been going on for? I know that we're not, you know, capable of like saving everything, but we have to do our part. So yes, let's keep going ahead, and let's keep doing this.
Amen, sister. What a beautiful note to end on. And I encourage people, if you guys don't know who Sharah is and you guys aren't connected with her in the chat, like, come hang out with us. She's there a lot. That's one good way that you guys can go communicate with her. And I'll also have her Facebook page linked too. That way you guys can go connect with her. And she's on there at Catherine Noel Peterson. So it's different than the name that she's using today. If you guys are listening and not watching, you guys can go type that in Facebook and go find her. But I'll have it linked in the show notes too for you guys. And I encourage you guys to leave your love in the chat, to leave your love in the comment section, to go connect with her and leave her love that way. She's really been just such a huge part of this community. And it's an honor to get to share your story and to have it be a piece of the puzzle now. So I can't thank you enough for being here, and I can't thank you guys enough for all your support and love. Like, I look at this as a group project. Like, all that I'm doing is like listening to stories, recording them, and then publishing them. But if there wasn't a community around to help foster that, to care about it, and to help it grow in a healthy way, it would just be like me talking into, the abyss. So like, I can't do this without people like Sharah and all of you listening. So I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for helping, and for helping care, and for helping nurture this, and just for being here. Like, listening is a huge deal. It doesn't seem like it, but just sitting here and listening, that's huge. So I can't thank all of you enough, and just for helping make this what it is. So you guys, I will have her Facebook page in the show notes. I'll have all my links in the show notes. Connect with me too. I never know what platforms will keep me and which ones are going to eventually let me go. So keep in touch as much as you guys can. God bless you all. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.